Namaste, good morning. You look very happy and relaxed today. Nice. We are going to study because you have enrolled in the university education. So, you understand dance not only as a performance, but dance as part of education, as teaching, as learning process. So, as far as we know, dance was an activity indulged in by human beings all over the world to express joy, celebration, festivity, even grief. In farming and labor communities, dance was indulged in as an activity to wear off tiredness and fatigue after hard days' physical labor. The beat was provided by clapping in the early days, to be followed by songs accompanied by drumming on roughly hewn hollow wooden blocks on whose ends were stretched leather pieces. As communities evolved, dance began to get a structure. Repetitive steps and simple movements marked the development of communal dancing, as it was easy to follow and could include all members of the group or the community with ease. Children learned the steps following their parents' footsteps, so to speak, and the tradition was carried forward from generation to generation with changes in the steps and songs. As communities evolved further from rural to urban vocations, religion began to engage people with narratives moving from materialistic to spiritual quest, and education moved from informal to structured. Dance began to be looked upon as a formal method of performative expression and entertainment for others, an audience, and not just for oneself. While in forest based tribes and rural folk communities, community dances were also formalized to some extent in terms of movements and accompanying song and music. In urban areas, dance became highly evolved form with trained dancers performing to complicated beats and orchestra in palaces and in temples and commanding respect in society. This transformation in the performance, understanding the study of dance happened over a number of centuries, and this change has been documented in several cultures in great detail, but also it is left open as oral tradition like in India and many of the South Asian countries. How was dance taught in those cultures? How was its practice sustained through the rise and fall of kingdoms, of political upheavals? What kind of significant changes did dance then undergo in terms of its movements, content, music, dress, presentation and patronage? And how did these changes affect the socio-economic situation of the dancers as well as the cultural ethos of the region where it was popular? Coming to modern and contemporary times, dance and its educations have undergone a galloping and fascinating change over the last centuries in different degrees in different countries across the globe. Some of these are fundamental changes that have affected the way in which dance practice has come down to us over the many centuries. Dance education is now generally available across the world in pedagogic formats similar to several other standard subjects in school and colleges. However, there continues to be a great need for a broad and vital understanding of dance in our society if we truly believe that dance is a great art discipline which belongs to all people and should be made accessible to all people. a necessary element of the good society in the Athenian tradition as defined by David Aspin in the symbolic order. If dance is to play its civilizing role in our society, especially in the developed world, to join the struggle against Philistines, want more and more people to understand its symbol and relationships. It needs to always establish its importance in the imagination of people. This is necessary because social dance in the commercial circumstances, recreational dance and folk dance tradition go back to since the man is born and definitely to the time of Natya Shastra and before in the Indian subcontinent. In the Asian cultures, there was a strong and well established tradition of classical and semi classical dance teaching, which in the Indian subcontinent was propagated under the Guru Sishya Parampara. Widespread colonization of countries in the Asian, African, and South American continents by European countries such as England, Spain, France, Portugal, and Netherlands in the 18th and 19th centuries did affect the practice of local dance traditions in these countries, often due to the issues of Christian moralities of the colonizers who felt the apparently hedonistic dances of the pagans needed to be controlled. Dancing is a part of history of human movement, human culture, and human communication. The first example of dance tradition on the Indian subcontinent is seen in the Harappan dancing girl figure found in the Indus Valley civilization sites. Later, references to Apsaras, the beautiful celestial dancers of Hindu mythology, indicate the value and respect that both dance and dancers commanded, as did dance teachers. The seminal text Natya Shastra is a proof that science of dramaturgy was understood, appreciated, and its tenets followed and taught. Later texts such as Abhinay Darpanam concentrated on certain important aspects of dance technique, content, and expressions. Such texts were written by those scholars who had done thorough research not just in the theory but also the practice of dance and were familiar with the challenges faced by dance practitioners in each age in which they were written. One assumes that these texts must have been guiding resources for dance teachers in the years to come. In each area in the vast Indian subcontinent that stretched from present day Afghanistan in the west to the Burma in the east, communities and the cultural traditions that evolved with them gave rise to forms of dance and music that celebrated rituals and festivals, marriages and births, victory in war, the change in seasons, a glorious harvest. Over a period of time, these evolved in strong traditions that offered a sense of identity to each community. When religion grew to play an important role in the life of the community, it built temples to house and honor their gods and goddesses, and there were powerful priests who dictated the norms of behavior and morality to the community. The priest's power was kept in control by the community chieftain and the ruler, or though sometimes the priest became more powerful than the rulers. The best dancers in the community, more often the women, therefore began to be chosen to dance in the temples before the gods and in the palaces before the rulers. At time and at a point of time, these dancers began to be allotted a special place of respect in society, and dance became their profession, helping them earn a living with royal and temple patronage. In turn, they supported their families as well as their entourage of teachers, musicians, singers, and so on. This situation led to a kind of bifurcation in dance practice, where the community dancing that had simple steps and could be indulged in by anyone in the community was known as folk, while the highly stylized formal dance forms practiced by the professional dancers came to be known as classical. With the slow but steady disappearance of the royal and temple patronage, by the 17th and 18th centuries, the colonization of the subcontinent, the professional dancers fell on bad times and often had no choice but to take on rich patrons to survive. However, they still managed to keep their art alive when, post independence, the surviving dancers got a lifeline and their art was revived. In India today, we have a few dances that are classical and many more that come under the general umbrella of folk, popular, tribal, Bollywood, pop, disco, and the mix. In the earlier times, classical dance was the forte of the really talented and beautiful dancers. Dance poses decorated temples, influencing temple architecture and sculptures, which survive to this day and are like illustrations to the scholarly dance texts written at the time for construction of these temples. During the years of rejuvenation of the Indian classical dance forms, in addition to the sustained efforts by committed dance enthusiasts of getting respectability to the forms via the veneration of the teachers, one of the main instruments of rejuvenation was opening of dance classes for girls from middle class families, slowly leading to introduction of dance as a subject of choice in schools. The setting up of nationally recognized Sangeet Natya Academy and the establishments of the Gandharva Mahavidyalaya that offered college-like courses in music and dance with formal syllabi structure and examination schedules went a long way to gentrify the practice of dance and music that was still the middle of the 20th century in India, linked to the kothas and brothels. Private classes for dance, especially for children, run by trained dancers either as a way to make a living or a means to attract and train good dancers for their own performing companies, sprang up in almost all large cities and towns. A few universities offer structured undergraduate and postgraduate degree courses in performing arts as well as short-term diploma and certificate courses. Now, doctoral and postdoctoral studies are also possible, in fact, greatly encouraged. To those young performers seriously interested in pursuing a career in dance, the opportunities are increasing. With strong family support, they can go solo, begging performance in large cities as well as foreign tours on the strength of their expertise, talent and superb performances. If they do not have the confidence to go solo, they can join a dance group. Often their teacher would have one and perform with the group until they decide to move on. In India, we still do not have a dance companies that are the norm in the West, so that option is largely not available, but still there are now starting dance companies. Dance teachers with groups often get opportunities to get their groups to perform at social events, public festivals such as Durga Puja in Bengal, Ganeshotsav in Maharashtra and Gujarat, and so on, at wedding, sangeets, at cultural events often organized as entertainment for participants by those who manage large scale conferences and seminars, and by event managers for their entertainment programs. Opportunities for choreography as well as performance were earlier available in the Indian film industry, including both Hindi or Bollywood as well as the regional, which employed trained and committed dancers to either perform themselves if the film was dance themed, or could choreograph the numerous song and dance routine that each Indian film was dotted with. Over the last 25 years, numerous opportunities have been increasingly available for programs on television. This includes TV soaps, teleseries, historical documentaries, and nowadays a vast number of dance reality shows popular on almost every TV channel. Since 1949, after the establishment of College of Music, Dance and Theatre, the Faculty of Performing Arts in the Maharaja Sayaji Rao University of Baroda till 2015, more than 15 to 20 universities have offered the undergraduate and postgraduate in courses in dance, along with offering the PhDs. Most of the departments have 3 to 4 classical dance styles offered with a limited number of teaching and very few supportive faculty. There are very limited number of students willing to study dance in the universities. The traditional methods of Guru Sishya still prevails to a larger extent, though the methods of teaching has changed in this scenario too. And not only that, no Sishya lives in the house of the Guru. Even in earlier times, the Shishyas did not live in the house of the Gurus unless they were relatives. Tenured positions for dance teachers in the universities in India is still very limited, and it is a dream with very few positions available. Dance research and scholarship therefore finds very few takers. Opportunities to write on dance are quite rare and poorly paid, if at all. Schools are all over India to employ dance teachers on a regular basis, though they may have to as duplicate as subject teachers in the primary classes as well to justify their workload. Those teaching dance in schools often find it easier to access enough students to run a profitable dance class on weekends or evenings, preparing students for the private examinations. While this was happening in India, what was the situation of dance in the Western cultures? In most part of the Western world, the vigorous 20th century expansion of dance ran parallel with the expansion of the world we live in today, of industry and manufacture, international trade, agriculture, transport, electronic and nuclear technology, and the consumer economy. To the existing traditional arts, the 20th century added cinema, television and photography. Obviously, there was a connection between dance and all these changes, which provided the socio-economic context within which dance was performed, studied and watched, and which determined the values that influenced the creation of dance. Though this connection between modernism and postmodernism in the arts and in industry, lifestyle and public values worldwide was understood and acknowledged, not much attention is paid to their influence on dance forms and dance content. Many such dance scholar teachers in the Western countries were critical of this attitude, which they believe was reflected in the way dance education in schools was treated. Peter Brinson, the dance historian and chairman of the National Inquiry into Arts and the Community, says that the treatment of dance in schools as a physical education subject rather than art like drama reinforces this separation of dance from a common context with other arts. Dance in the curriculum is seen as adding a gloss of expression to the physical movement. It is useful perhaps in gymnastics, but otherwise of little value in game center syllables. No wonder it becomes marginalized, a minority concern throughout the lives of thus educated. History shows very clearly the error of this attitude. Bryanston goes on to describe how the romantic movement and the popular image of classical ballet today was born out of the huge social changes set in motion by the Industrial Revolution starting in England by the end of the 18th century. It changed all the arts and revolutionized theatrical dancing in important ways. It altered the status of the art and its creators, replacing the patronage of the court and nobility with a commodity status for the arts, rather like the emphasis on market forces today. These new commercial practices had a positive impact for the arts. The role and social impact of the arts were enhanced and their communication reached in a broader public. New themes were the second great change in the theatrical dance, stimulated by the new culture and value of industrialization. It was first seen in England through literature, poetry, and novel, and dance was last to show the influence almost a generation later. In between, painting, music, and drama adopted the new themes and attitude to life. The third change was advance in technique. In dance, new methods of training explored the air to represent ethereality and the mystery, to defy gravity by rising from the ground or fly above the ground in effortless jumps. At the physical level, gaslight entered the theatre. The proscenium curtain separated stage and the auditorium. A new style of dance dress was devised to correspond to the ethereal beings ruling the dance stage. But one of the most important changes of the 19th century was that of the attitude of society to women and the female form. The displacement of men by women on the ballet stage was more than a triumph of physical achievement and artistry to create a different kind of focus for the new choreography. It also reflected the sexual attitudes towards women and that total exploitation of women considered the property by men, which was a 19th century characteristic. The realm of dance is education of the body and of the imagination. The responsibility for educating the imagination should run naturally through the teaching of every subject. The arts, though, can be the most comprehensive and direct influence on the imagination, with dance adding qualities of its own. The foundation of such an education has to be laid in school and later in higher education, strengthened by an understanding of the historical background of past and present aesthetics and artistic development. For this reason, there is a strong case to include some arts practice within the foundation courses of all schools as a part of the methodology of study. These arguments have been presented in the Arts in Schools and developed further in the National Curriculum Council's Arts in Schools project, published in 1990. A report of this project identified how the arts represent experience in symbolic form. Each art thus is made mode of understanding. The visual mode uses light, color and images. The oral mode uses sounds and rhythm. The kinesthetic aesthetic mode uses bodily movement. The verbal mode uses spoken or written words. The inactive mode uses imagined roles. A properly balanced education seeking fully to explore and the potential of each young person should provide opportunities to work in all of these modes of understanding. This lies within the aim of education itself, but shows also that arts education in schools is an essential part of cultural education. Where higher education is concerned, the first university course in dance was launched at the University of Wisconsin in USA in 1927. Since then, dance courses at degree level plus advanced research have become a normal part of American higher education. Not so in UK nor in most of Europe, where older concepts of nature of knowledge still persist. In the UK, dance existed in higher education only in the certificate course for teachers training, then in the B.Ed course when graduate training for teachers was introduced during the reorganization of teaching training in 1970s. However, there has been very serious British dance scholarship, and this scholarship is rooted in three areas of historical research. One, in theatre history, looking back to Tudor and Stuart masques, then to the strong presence of theatrical dance in London. In 20th centuries, with Russians and Americans acting as final stimuli in creation of British classical and modern dance forms. Two, in the British folk dance and folk music dating back in the recorded history to at least 8th century, and before that research and documented by Cecil Sharp, Percy Granger and others, leading today to a strong anthropological strain in dance scholarship alongside the scholarship of folk dance and folk music itself. In educational history dating back to Thomas Eliot, carried forward by John Colet, Roger Ascham, Erasmus, John Locke, John Weaver, and the private teachers of the 19th, 18th, and 20th centuries, into the impact of Rudolf Laban on public education, the arrival of Graham style contemporary dance, and the impact of major teaching and examination bodies in the private sector. Such deep historical roots characterize British dance scholarship and differentiate it from its American counterpart, where the concentration is on the development of a more recent natural culture. They link it firmly also with Italian and French sources on which British scholars and teachers drew. The fundamental principles of dance scholarship is a partnership between verbal and non-verbal knowledge, requiring a balance between theory and practice and a broad interdisciplinary approach. This is often used as a general guideline for all dance in higher education. In spite of extraordinary wealth of the legacy from the private researchers and critics, from as far as John Weaver, say particularly since 1930s, a privately based scholarship ultimately is unsatisfactory to underpin the development of national dance culture. Scholarship is here interpreted broadly, not in the rigid terms of annotated texts favored in the academic circles, but in terms of original contributions to knowledge, theatrical or practical, worked out in the studios as well as in libraries, books, lectures, and discussion groups. Also, just to give an example of how dance as a popular, professional, amateur, or occasional social engagement can have a wide range of influence. The National Organization for Dance and Mime in UK held an international conference in September 1990 on the healthier dancer to bring together the dance profession and the medical profession and opinion formers in an effort to increase understanding between the disciplines. It was a response to injury crisis in dance profession that needed to be addressed. Injury reaches across all forms of dance, classical and contemporary, folk and social, non-Western solo performers to the largest touring companies. Nor does injury mean only snapped tendons, sprains, broken bones, torn ligaments, strained muscles. Injury issues extend themselves to body weight, eating disorders, poor nutrition, psychological disorders, fatigue, general illness, weak immunity and first aid. The conclusion of the conference produced an extensive need for further research by dance and allied discipline in physiology, physiotherapy, orthopedic surgery, anatomy, food biomechanics, chiropody, diet, psychology and other fields. Thus, much work that researchers the impact of several other disciplines on dance needs to be undertaken as well. To conclude, everyone generally accepts that dance makes a distinctive contribution to education in that it uses the most fundamental mode of human expression, movement. The body as an instrument of expression is unique in its accessibility. With the other arts, it provides considerable potential for the expression of the personal and universal qualities. Through its use of non-verbal communication, dance gives pupils the opportunity to participate in a way which differs from any other area of learning. In a broad and balanced curriculum, this important area of human experience should not be neglected. And I am very happy to let you know that almost all schools in India have introduced dance as part of their curriculum, at least not curriculum but dance teaching, which is a very positive sign. Thank you. Goodbye.